Evening, folks. It's old Buster coming to you again, reading you another story. Now, you know who this story's going to be about. It's got to be Walter, because the name of it's the Trickster. If there ever was one, that's him. And I want to say howdy to everybody out there, all our friends, fans, and people that listen to us. I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you. A lot of people just say that, but I dearly do mean it. Thank you again for dropping in. And if you ever want to give us a shout, just get us on Buster and the Boys at yahoo.com. We'll be glad to send you things or talk to you or whatever we need to do. All right. Now that tears it. The old pot calling the kettle black again. Didn't I tell you that boy Walter was a mess? Come to find out, he done showed out something fierce. What a pistol that boy is, and a mess for sure. Here's just a few things he done conjured up and let fly. Now that big brother Ike done heard about Walter's tale on brother Melvin. He said he just couldn't let it go by without telling on some of Walter's hijinks. One time a gal there in Groom went a-looking all over the place for Walter. Now how this come to be, we'll never know. But he done put a dead calf in the back of her station wagon car, and she was a-looking for him to get it out of there. The critter done smelled up that car so bad you couldn't ride in it. Flies done blowed that carcass, and skippers was a-crawling every which place. Just downright disgusting. Well, kind of like down at the dryer when beans were left out in the augers in the rain, and you had to scoop out the rotten beans with the skippers with your hands everywhere. They done that out on the farm too a bunch of times. That's when that heat gets to them, you know. You know what a skipper is, I hope, folks. They're maggots. Then there was a time Walter and one of them Britton boys, that's old Manley it was up on top of the grocery store chunking maters and eggs at folks. Just a-splitting their sides, they thought it was so darn funny. Well, a police feller there in town they used to razz come by and ask them if they done seed who was a-throwing them eggs and maters that folks a-passing by. Well, they said heck no, but they would help him try to find the ones that did it, and jumped right on in that police car and rode off with him. And here it was them all along throwing the eggs and maters. Told you they's fit to be tied, them boys. They used to devil that poor feller, that police feller, something awful. Walter and Manley, or that other Britton boy, George, would go into the Ranch House Cafe and see that police feller there and sit down with him and eat a bite. When it come to pay, one of them would say he would pay, and then the other would say he'd pay, and he'd get the check, and then the police feller said he would pay, and he would get it, and then both the boys would say okay and hightail it out of there, leaving the feller to pay the bill. Poor feller never did catch on to that, they say. Then there was times they would see that old boy there in the cafe, and when he would get up to talk to somebody or go to the outhouse, Walter put butter or syrup or anything else they could find to mess up his britches when he sat down. That police feller never did figure it out with old Walter and them Britton boys. On Saturday, Walter was up to the rodeo when they was having one there in town, and he run up to that feller and told him to trade hats with him, quick like. Said he didn't want nobody to recognize him. Now, it was never told if Walter done sidled up to some gal and got her all ditherated or pulled some prank on one of them boys down from Claude that wanted to give old Walter a poke. One thing we know is he done something. Well, oldest brother Ike never did get too many scraps and the like, but was said he never did lose one neither. At least not known about by anybody. But once that Walter done got Ike a sore jaw. And that's for sure. Believe it was at a ball game, and Walter got into it over something or another, nobody knows. Well, Ike and Melvin was there, and when Walter, not weighing more than 120 pounds soaking wet, at that time, was about to get a whooping from some fellers. Probably deserved it. And waded right in onto the fracas. You just couldn't get on one of them Ollinger boys without getting on the others, you know. Well, Melvin jumped on out the truck, the one he done throwed the motor out of, and Ike started getting out of there on the other side when some feller landed the uppercut right smack dab on the button of his jaw. Of course, the fight was on and they won, but Walter was always a stirring the pot, according to Ike it was. Now, old Melvin sure enough did his share, but Walter was a pistol too, he said. Another time, Miss Ollinger was a baking some pies for Sunday dinner and a viewing over at Widder Sim's place. Somebody done switched out the sugar for salt in the sugar bowl. Well, now, Miss Ollinger baked all day long, and when she was done, she tasted one of them pies, and it was purely awful. She throwed out every one of them pies, and the hogs wouldn't even eat them. She got hold Ike by the ear and scolded him proper. Well, Ike said, "Mama, I didn't do it," but she reckoned he did for some reason. Well, Ike just knowed Walter done it. Of course, Melvin could have, but he liked pie too much to mess up a good pie for dinner on Sunday. Them boys, I told you, is a mess. Well, later on in years, when Walter was asked about all that, he just grinned but wouldn't a bit to nothing. But you just know he done it all. Well, Ike said to this day his and Mama thought he put that salt in the sugar bowl. So I reckon we see Walter 'tweren't no angel and done come by being a trickster for good reason. Seems like old Melvin wasn't the only one to get into mischief. Playing a trick on Walter's paw was putting your life in some kind of danger, excepting for Melvin, that is. The time Walter, and you guessed it, one of them Britton boys, stole a bunch of road close signs. Well, they don't steal down there, they just borrowed them. And sawhorse barriers from the city. And like I say, let's say they borrowed, not stole. None of them boys steal nothing now. Anyhow, they didn't put them signs and sawhorses on every road they could find round their place. The next day, wait, I get a tickle, I can't even read this thing. The next day they was to herd some cattle down the road to a new pasture. And when they started to push them cows and they come up to one of them barriers, they would turn back on Walter and his and Paul and the other boys. Well, heading off them cows was surely a chore, don't you know, and his and Paul was madder'n the wet hen. He was fit to be tied and was a-going to the city and the county and see what darn fool done put them signs and barriers up to block the roads. Oh, don't rightly know how Walter got out of that one, but I suppose he did, 'cause he didn't get a thrashing that day from his and Paul. Well, them days sure enough left a little hide skunt here and there and give 'em all a bit of a reputation, but made for some memories that nobody in the town of Groom will ever forget. Come to think of it, the whole county too. Well, nobody ever heard of a bad thing about them Ollinger gals that they ever did, just that they was downright pretty, and as the sun kissed rose at sunrise, and it would do a sparkling on all of them. They just pretty much helped their ma and other folks that needed it, and was doing church work too, you know. Just getting Walter to church or something. Well, I'm darn sure we'll find out a whole lot more of Melvin's and Walter's tricks and what they was up to. Why, Melvin was even married up to Louise and still is showing out. Last thing we heard on Walter when him and Lenny Brown was a-traveling with Buster on the trip out west. Well, they was a-staying at this motel for a few days, and Walter and Lenny done bought themselves 2 motorcycles. A Harley-Davidson, they call them. They went a-riding that afternoon, and Buster went on back to his room as he was a-feeling poorly like. Buster had to pick up Jesse at the airport later that afternoon and was going to take a little nap before he done it. Well, when Buster got to the door to his room and put his key in the door and opened the door just a little bit, 2 loud shots was fired. Buster thought he was back in the war, I tell you. Like to had a heart attack right then and there. Hit the ground and a-hollering, lock and load. The women at the front desk come a-running and was a-wondering what in the world was a-happening. Well, come to find out, Walter and Lenny done sneaked in the back door and rigged up some firecrackers and poppers so they would fire off when Buster opened the door. While all the popping was a-going on, streamers of all the rainbow colors was a-shooting off all over Buster's head and his person, and there was a mess to boot. Just goes to show you Walter ain't growed out of it yet. Well, he better keep one eye open, I tell you. Buster will get him one day. Don't you worry none about that. Well, like I say, Buster and Jesse never was like that, but Hired sure is now. Don't you think that little cherub face of his just don't do no tricking. Never will forget the tale of Buster and Walter roaming around on another trip they took out west again. Wasn't a room to be had for 150 miles. There was this old boy they knowed and met up with him there in Salt Lake City, Utah, and drove up to the mountains with them about 4 hours when they come to this little town. Got late so they started looking for a place to light for the night. Well, as I said, just none to be had, and then Buster finally talked this feller into a place he had out back with 2 bedrooms. Walter said he would walk and he'd find a place to park. Well, that took a while, and when they finally come to where the room was, Buster was walking around outside. Well, they all went into the place at the back bedroom that didn't have no electric plug-ins, so Buster couldn't plug up his breathing machine, so he had to sleep in the front room. Seeing how there was only 2 beds and 3 fellers, somebody had to share. Well, sure enough, it was Buster and Walter. The other old boy was about 6'7" or 6'8", and Walter done went in and short-sheeted that bed. Never heard such a caterwauling. That boy done tore all them bedclothes off of that bedstead. Well, Buster done crawled up into the bed with Walter, and he was a-hollering, "Don't touch me, get a loose." Buster said, "Why, you crazy darn fool, can't you see I'm hooked up to this air breathing machine, can't even turn over?" Now, you gotta know this is later on live, folks. Walter finally shucked his britches and hunkered down in the bed. Well, Buster looked over at Walter and asked him, "What in the world are you a-doing?" Well, Walter was flat on his back and had his ball cap pulled down over his eyes, crossed his arms and all. Buster said he ought to just ball up on his head like a coon and line him out good. But he didn't want to take the wrestling and tussling this time of night. Told him to turn out the lights, but Walter told him not to tell anybody about all this room sharing business. Well, Buster said, "Look, Walter, how long I knowed you and how many times we slept over all these years. Don't be nuts, Luann don't care." Walter said, "What would people think?" Buster said, "There ain't here, stuck in the middle of nowhere with no bed neither, so just go to sleep." Well, next morning that long, tall old boy was up and had him first off. He said he went to sleep sweating, and it was so stifling hot he couldn't even breathe. Come morning, he seen icicles hanging from the ceiling. He done asked Walter what he done, because he had to pull all them bedclothes off of his bed like the froze. Lord, I can see it now. Well, Walter done cranked up that air conditioner to high and pointed and directed the air right straight at that old boy in the bed. No wonder he froze. What a night. Well, Buster said he slept just fine and told him, "Let's get some breakfast." But that ball cap of Walter's was something else. Said he had to keep one eye open. He just didn't know what was going on, but he snored all night. Well, Luann said now Buster knowed what she had to put up with every night. Buster told her Walter sure didn't keep his feet warm, and she said he didn't hers neither. What a trip. Of course, they've been on some good ones over the years, and we got tales a-coming. Till Walter gets into more mischief, but that's another story. Old Buster signing out. Have a blessed day.